Pride and Prudence, written by Fran Ervin. Exterior, Carlton House, London, 1814, evening. A painting of the massive Carlton House mansion slowly fades into the real thing. And what a night to be at Carlton House. The baller of balls has taken place. It's the 1814 version of a Hollywood red carpet. Ladies and gentlemen emerge from their posh carriages, putting the fine in finery as they enter the sprawling marble mansion before them. Interior, Carlton House, ballroom, evening. As we pan along a long hall decorated with different portraits and drawings, we end up at a pair of massive oak doors. The sounds of a party beats on them from the inside, begging to be released. The doors swing ajar, excitedly revealing the lavish contents of a ballroom full of crunked revelers. This party is lit, and that's not just referring to the hundreds of candles that decorate the room. These people are getting turned 19th century style. Posh couples glide on the floor as crowds watch from the sidelines, imbibing on bottomless glasses of champagne and port. As we make our way through the crowd, eligible bachelors turn and smile towards us eagerly. The voice of our heroine, Prudence Priestly, guides us through this oasis of thirsty men.
It is a truth universally acknowledged that a single woman in possession of a good fortune must be in want of a husband.
As we make our ways through the smiling herd of Victorian hunks, they become momentary portraits of each prospective suitor, almost like an old-fashioned dating profile. Think old-fashioned Tinder, complete with a title underneath each portrait. Beau Buford, unfortunate gambler. He morphs back into the real thing, which is unfortunately quite fake as he flashes a cheesy smile. Left swipe for sure. Martin Marvin's unfortunate investor. As the portrait morphs back into reality, we see the smile turn into a scowl as he picks at one of his teeth. Sex bomb, but still a left swipe. Sidney Snyder, unfortunate spender. As he comes back to human form, we see him chug the wine over earnestly as he grabs another and chugs that too. He hiccups and wipes his snotty nose in a most dashing manner. Nope. We glide through what seems to be an endless sea of scrubs and well-dressed duds, many of whom seem to be gazing in the same direction towards the entry hall. They check out the single ladies on the other side of the room who dare not cross without an escort. As we follow their gaze, we pass by giggling ingenue after blushing potential bay until we finally rest upon the very well-dressed but unimpressed Prudence Priestly. She is not exactly a natural beauty, but her lavish attire and jewelry attempt to make up for her criminally plain natural features. Prudence becomes a portrait for a mere moment as she gawks in disgust at the desperate ladies around her. Prudence Priestly of the priestly fortune, unfortunate spinster. Prudence and her good friend Catherine Hopkins look at the lavish surroundings around them. If not for their overwhelming opulence and levity surrounding them, one would almost think that they were bored.
I am bored.
Okay, so Prudence is a bit bored despite the beautiful ball and bounty, but Catherine surely is.
Very bored indeed.
So she's bored too. Catherine lets out a yawn to accentuate how truly tedious this ball is, just in case anyone should doubt her at her word.
It's always the same faces, the same rich people.
The same.
Oh. The same rich pastries. Oh.
The same rich pastries always.
And the same very poor wine.
The same poor wine. Oh, yes, it's very poor indeed. Oh, it's disgusting.
Catherine finishes off the glass just to make sure it's as gross as she originally believed. Prudence looks around the room at revelers laughing together.
The same drab conversations with the same drab people.
Should I not be insulted by your last observation?
Oh, present company excluded, naturally. Catherine. What I wouldn't give to have just a little respite from the monotony of all this dullness. It's all quite predictable. The same potential suitor after potential suitor lined up to dance with me until my feet are as sore as my spirits are tonight. My dance card is already half full.
Oh, yes, indeed. I thank the stars each evening that I do not have that problem as my dance card is half empty.
There is no avoiding it much longer. I promised to dance to Mr. Buford and Mr. Marvins. Oh, and of course, Mr. Snyder. Ugh, Mr. Snyder. He seems the most desperate of them all. He's a feline enthusiast. We'll talk of nothing but cats all night long. Ugh. There is not one gentleman in this ballroom who truly deserves my attention. Not a single.
Not a single.
Prudence's eyes meet with a dashing tall gentleman who has just entered the room. Her face falls in disbelief. It's like she's seen a ghost, a very hot ghost. The man smiles at her and nods a little bit as their eyes lock. Prudence's collected coolness is instantly washed away with a bright blush.
Prudence, are you all right?
Catherine follows her gaze to the gentleman.
Oh, it's him.
The gentleman seems to look at her for longer than is comfortable.
Mr. Fitzwilliam Darcy.
Mr. Fitzwilliam Darcy's intense gaze towards Prudence is broken by a young, pretty woman, Elizabeth, who grabs his arm. He turns and begins to speak to her. She looks over at Catherine and gives her a smile before diverting her attention back to Mr. Darcy. Catherine stares, shell-shocked.
And that must be her.
Yes, that is a new wife, no doubt.
Elizabeth, I think her name is.
The way Mr. Darcy looks at Elizabeth is one of a man consumed by love. He smiles at her so gently, and she looks back at him enamored. This look shatters Prudence.
You're right, Prudence.
Truth is, Catherine, when it comes to the story of my life, I believe that Mr. Darcy has always been my whole novel. But in his story, I do not think I would even get a sentence, not even as a minor character.
They both look towards the smiling Elizabeth Bennet, who chats on merrily to her husband.
I do think this ball has too many new faces for my liking.
If only things could stay the same. How I do miss the dullness of 10 minutes ago.
Shall we go, my dear friend? I suddenly am not feeling very well, I think.
How could I let my ill friend leave alone? It seems I must leave with you so I can give you a ride in my carriage. If I must go, then I must go.
Catherine takes Prudence by the arm and they make their way through the crowded party.
Thank you, Catherine.
Catherine gives her a sympathetic nod as they escape. Exterior, the Priestly Manor, Belgravia, evening. Prudence is assisted out of her carriage by a footman. She sighs as she looks up at her humble home. Okay, so it is more like a humble, sprawling mega manor. Amongst the shadow of its overwhelming reach, even Prudence suddenly seems quite small. The massive home is dark except for a light in the far-off window.
My father is still awake?
I believe he is entertaining a guest. Mr. Bannerman is here reading to him this evening.
So the guest is entertaining father, more likely.
Prudence heads towards the home. Interior, the Priestly Manor, night. The house is dark. The coldness and emptiness of it is palatable. A single ray of light emits from one of the rooms at the end of a long hallway, a beacon of warmth. The laughter of two men can be heard from it. Prudence makes her way down the hall and gently opens the door. Interior, Priestly Library, night. Sir Winston Priestly sips a glass of sherry and he listens intently as his guest, Jonathan Bannerman, reads to him.
And so it is said that a word must become a friend, or you will not understand it. Perhaps you do well to be cool and detached when you are seeking information, but I remind you of a wife who complained, when I ask John if he loves me, he thinks I am asking for information.
Now, who was this again who wrote such a thing?
His name is Edward Coke. He is quite a brilliant legal mind. I have become quite fond of reading his cases in particular.
The floor creaks a bit as Prudence shifts. Jonathan looks up at her and seems to instantly become a bit nervous.
Miss Priestley, you are home quite early.
And you are out quite late, Mr. Bannerman.
Now, you know I have told our dear Jonathan here that he can use our library any time, any hour, any day for his studies, or for his pleasure. This young man is going to be one of the great barristers of our time. It is my honor to be a sponsor of his education.
Of course. Mr. Bannerman knows he's welcome. He may spend all night with his books. But for you, Father, I fear the hour is very late indeed. It is time for you to retire.
I often wonder who is the parent and who is the child.
Oh, we will see who complains about his bedtime. That will answer your question.
Ah, she is a quick wit, is she not?
Sir Winston stands up and nods towards Jonathan, who is submerged behind towers of books.
Thank you for the good company this evening. You are truly a master of stimulating conversation, young man.
Jonathan nervously looks at Prudence. Prudence returns with a look that could cut glass.
Was the ball the ball you went? Was it good? Nice, good.
It was as stimulating as this conversation.
That's why I avoid them, both balls and conversations.
You will go to the Regent's Ball this year, though, at least. Will you not? It is our tradition.
I would like the balls better if there was just not so much dancing and music.
And talking and people and revelry and fun. Then it would be the perfect evening for you, Mr. Bannerman. Add some books and you would have a library. Carolyn Bingley asked after you this evening.
How wonderful.
Why you do not show her more interest, Jonathan? She is wealthy and she is very influential in society.
It seems I would have nothing to contribute to the match, alas.
You are not ugly and you are not stupid. That is something.
I am not stupid. I would agree there, which is why I shall not pursue a wife.
You need more festivity in your life, Mr. Bannerman.
You do not mind if I take a few of these back to school to read, Sir Winston?
Never do, Jonathan. I am happy someone uses my books.
I use them.
Yes, that is true. She used the Canterbury Tales over there to squash a wasp the other day.
You come now, Father. You are very tired, I see. You are talking nonsense. Good evening, Mr. Bannerman.
Jonathan sheepishly meets Prudence's gaze. Dude is nervous AF. Prudence and Sir Winston leave the room as Jonathan sits back down among his pile of books. In the hallway, he can still hear Prudence and her father speak.
Father, why did you tell him about the wasp? That was unnecessary.
Whatever do you mean? That was a compliment, child.
A compliment? You made me sound quite simple.
That was not my intention at all. My daughter, I remember thinking how proud I was of you.
Proud?
Yes, most ladies would have screamed and run out of the room, but not my brave Prudence. She stayed and fought the wasp. Ah, my daughter is a strong fighter.
I'm not sure if I am quite as strong as you might think, Father.
Whatever do you mean?
Flashback, ball, night. Elizabeth Darcy's face cackles as she turns and glares at Prudence. Total biatch. She looks like an evil crone. Perhaps this memory isn't exactly how it happened, but it's exactly how Prudence remembers it, and it's pretty much just as good as the truth.
This evening at the ball, I encountered a terrible, ugly wasp. One of the most ferocious wasps I have ever seen. And I was stung.
Elizabeth glares at Prudence with a cold stare. She narrows her eyes at Prudence as she pulls Mr. Darcy closer to her. Savage.
I did not stay and fight. I simply ran away, Father.
Prudence looks at a painting of her mother. Her father smiles at the painting too.
Sometimes my heart hurts so much, Father. It has broken so many times, and I fear with each break it has weakened tremendously.
Prudence smiles at the portrait of her mother.
It may feel weak, yet it still beats on. Even when the wasps of life sting, you carry on, Prudence. That is what true strength is.
They begin to depart down the hallway. Jonathan looks down at his book, but it's clear he's been listening to them.
In my defense, the wasp I encountered this evening was a very large one. At least 8 stone, at least.
Exterior Priestly Manor garden, day. Prudence walks arm in arm with Catherine. They fan themselves excessively.
I've given much thought to the situation we encountered last night, my dear friend.
Oh, and what have you decided?
I can part with Mr. Fitzwilliam Darcy. Catherine, I do believe I can let him go.
Oh, that is wonderful. He will be most relieved, I'm sure, especially since he has married another and does not seem to think of you ever.
Sometimes the heart remembers what the mind does not. Catherine, that is where he carries me, I am sure, in his heart.
Catherine raises an eyebrow at the bunny romantic. She prepares to break the obvious.
Before last night, Mr. Fitzwilliam Darcy had not seen you in years, Prudence. Nor do I think he really saw you very much, even if he was looking at you in the past. I mean that kindly. He has never made you even the slightest promise of love.
Technically, your points are valid. He was never mine in reality. But in my dreams, he was always mine. Always, Catherine. I have had claim on him since we were just children in Derbyshire. As long as I can remember, he has always been my Mr. Darcy.
I will consent to agree with you there.
I think I can force myself to be happy for him and his very poorly selected new bride, as long as...
As long as what?
As long as I can be sure she is a worthy woman for him. We know so little about this new Mrs. Darcy. Where did she come from? Who are her connections?
The Bingleys spent some time with her. Her sister Jane wed Charles Bingley, as you know. But other than that, they've been quite removed from anyone of importance.
Mr. Darcy and his bride have spent so much time isolated in Pemberley. It is no doubt because he feels he must hide her from us. Why else would a newlywed couple want to stay locked away, just the two of them, as long as they did?
And we cannot blame him for wanting to hide her from the world after seeing her. She's not exactly.
Indeed. She is not.
She looks up at the clouds above her, no doubt trying to find her head somewhere up there.
I remember the first time I met him, Catherine. We were just children. But he was always so kind. There were so many boys who would be cruel back then to me. Jonathan and the other children of the tenants used to throw mud at me and call me awfully cruel names.
Well, surely not Jonathan Bannerman. He's so refined now.
He was poor, and the poor behaved poorly. But Mr. Darcy and I, we have always been the same. From the same standards and manners. We have been equally superior to everyone else. He is the man to which I compare all others. And he is the reason I shall never marry. No man will ever be his equal. He's also the reason I have become the good, kind, humble woman I am today, Catherine. It is his influence that has bettered me as a true love often does. The dress was quite ugly, was it not, Miss Darcy?
Very hideous.
Miss Darcy? Makes me wonder, what else could be ugly about her? Her intentions, her integrity, her motives.
They always say you can judge a book by its cover.
It is decided, Catherine. I will take the liberty of investigating this Elizabeth Darcy. It is up to me to make sure she is worthy of him, Catherine. That she is fully deserving of such a good man. If I can just be sure that she is of excellent character and standing, then I shall be able to part with him once and for all.
Well, you are truly so kind, dear Prudence.
You are not wrong about my kindness. I would like to point out I have not even brought up the unflattering manner in which she wore her hair this past evening, and I will not bring it up.
But how will you investigate her without being found out?
Prudence sees Jonathan walking up the pathway carrying books.
It is an art form, really.
Jonathan stops and sees Prudence and Catherine both staring at him. He hugs his books nervously as they begin to wave at him. He sheepishly waves back to them suspiciously. Prudence smiles widely at him, which seems to make him all the more nervous. Jonathan is cautious. No good can come of Prudence being so nice to him. Hopefully, whatever her plot is, it will not be too humiliating. Interior Priestly Garden Room, day. Jonathan Bannerman stands posing in the middle of the room, wearing a Roman toga and holding a harp. He keeps uncomfortably checking to make sure the toga is covering him as much as possible. It's evident from the attire that Jonathan actually has some semblances of muscles. All that book carrying has done a body good. Prudence stands before him, drawing his likeness on an easel. Next to her, Catherine also attempts to draw, but she lacks Prudence's talent. He looks more like Slender Man in a toga in Catherine's depiction. Caroline Bingley licks her lips as she looks at Jonathan. She proceeds to draw on her easel, but is spending more time staring at Jonathan than her page. She's hungry for a snack, and the snack she is craving is beefcake. Caroline Bingley, fortunate gossip. Prudence and Catherine watch her as desperation seems to percolate out of her ravenous smile.
Been so long since we've been able to spend time together, Caroline.
It still simply amazes me how Mr. Bannerman has changed so much. He's quite different from the boy we knew in Derbyshire.
But that does happen to children. I mean, they do grow.
I'm not just referring to his appearance, I am just amazed at the transformation of his entire being. From a simple tenant farmer's child to a student of the law. I never expected him to amount to anything, but here is Mount Worthy.
She tries to look enticing, but Jonathan continues his pose unfaltering.
Indeed.
I think I shall try to touch one of his muscles when he is not looking.
Caroline looks at his arms, large.
For research, for my portrait, of course.
I can hear your conversation, just so you are aware.
Caroline musters up her sexiest look for Jonathan.
How fortunate for you to have Sir Winston sponsor your education. You may become something of worth yet, Mr. Bannerman.
If only I would. The Priestleys have always been so good to me. I owe them so much. Perhaps my career as an art model will allow me to pay them one day if my law career is not a success.
Father always saw Jonathan as the son he wished he had. And I always saw him as the sister I wish I had. I would dress him up in my play clothes and call him Beatrice. Remember that, Mr. Bannerman?
Thank you for sharing that story. She tortured me as a child, and she continues to torture me now.
I do recall you and your little friends from the farm not being completely innocent. You would pull my hair, throw mud pies at me.
Well, that is simply how little boys behave when they like a little girl.
That ain't Jonathan. Were you in love with me?
Yes, it surely must have been love. I'm sure it had nothing to do with retribution for being forced to wear your dresses.
We were young then. I would not do such a thing to you today.
Jonathan pulls down the toga awkwardly.
It seems you would. As I stand here before you, still essentially wearing a dress by your design.
A toga is not a dress.
Poor Mr. Bannerman.
Ugh, do not feel too bad for him now. He has one of the great legal minds of our generation. He can argue his way out of anything if he really wanted to.
My argument nor my mind seem to ever stand a chance when they stand placed against Miss Priestley. Case in point, I am in a toga right now.
Prudence blushes and looks back at her painting.
You can take the toga off if need be.
Everyone sits in an uncomfortable silence for a moment.
Caroline, was it not a lovely ball the other night?
Indeed.
Subtly bring up her brother's good friend being there?
Mr. Fitzwilliam Darcy, your brother's dear friend, was subtly there.
Jonathan's noticeably paying attention to the conversation, quite interested.
Yes, Charles told me Mr. Darcy was finally coming to London with his new bride.
His bride is very
Horrid.
Savage. Catherine and Prudence exchange looks.
Surely not. Mr. Darcy has always been such a good judge of character. He would not marry a horrid woman.
I really do not want to discuss it. I would rather say nothing than say something cruel about someone. But if I was the sort to speak cruelly, I would say I do not see how he could select someone such as her to marry. Everybody knows she married him solely for his 10,000 a year. She knew of his great wealth and set her sights on him from the start. I do not think he stood a chance against her plotting, really.
Time lapses. We see the drawings of Jonathan in the toga becoming more and more defined as the day passes on, and Caroline continues her anti-Elizabeth rant.
As I was saying, I do not want to discuss it, but I have it on good authority that she even said that it was after she saw Pemberley that her feelings for Mr. Darcy really materialized. A horrid woman. Horrid.
Time lapse. The drawings of Jonathan are almost complete as both Time and Caroline's rant march on.
The woman's mother is just awful, completely atrocious. She just goes on and on and on about the same subject forever, and the younger sister married George Wickham of all people. You remember him? Wild! To think the halls of Pemberley have been so polluted.
Catherine and Prudence listen in horror as they continue to finish their drawings of Jonathan.
Elizabeth Darcy is very smug. You can almost see the smugness and pridefulness ooze out of her, like a cat who got the cream. She is very fortunate that I refuse to speak of her faults to anyone, or it would be quite bad for her indeed.
The three women look at their completed drawings of Jonathan in the toga.
She takes walks. It is most shocking. Long walks, alone often. We used to see her in the country, walking for hours. Her dress would be covered with mud. Who walks like that? With no reason. She is clearly mad. Where is she going? Where?
Caroline smiles at her drawing of a very buff Jonathan.
All right, I think I am done now.
Caroline holds up a very unflattering portrait of Jonathan as she is drawn. His toga is much shorter in her drawing than it is in actuality.
I think I shall hang it in a place of honor in my home so that everyone may see it.
Please do not.
Caroline ignores him and smiles at Prudence and Catherine.
I suggest you avoid Hyde Park at all costs. She walks there every single day. You are sure to encounter her there if you do not use caution.
Catherine and Prudence exchange looks. Jonathan sees this and does not approve. Exterior, the Priestly manor. Prudence and Catherine wave to Caroline as she departs in her carriage. Jonathan awkwardly waves, still wearing his toga.
This Elizabeth Bennet truly sounds like a horrible person.
Quite horrible.
Your fears are justified. She is certainly not worthy of a man as esteemed as your Mr. Fitzwilliam Darcy.
There is only one thing to do.
Interfere in a matter that has nothing to do with you.
I shall make her my new best friend. And by best friend, her worst qualities will surely be exposed to me. I feel it would be very good for our constitutions, dear Catherine, to start taking daily walks in Hyde Park.
Whatever you're plotting, Miss Priestley, I beg of you to stop it all right now. No good can come of this scheme. Let the poor woman be.
I do not know what you mean. I simply love walks. Everyone knows that about me.
I do not remember you ever taking a walk in all the years I've known you.
Prudence and Catherine turn and head into the house.
You will end up looking foolish in all this.
Jonathan is left with the footman. The footman stares at Jonathan in his toga and raises an eyebrow. Jonathan pulls the toga down awkwardly to make sure it's covering him. He turns and enters the house, looking very foolish. Interior, garden room, day. Prudence is admiring her drawing of Jonathan. He enters the room, finally back in his non-toga attire. He takes a look at the drawing.
Well, what do you think?
I think you always admired Mr. Fitzwilliam Darcy when we were children. And I think if you truly still cared for him now, you would want him to be happy with his wife he has chosen.
I was asking what you think about my portrait, Mr. Bannerman. Beyond that, I do not require your criticism.
Prudence motions proudly to her portrait of Jonathan. He looks regal and strong in the drawing. He's quite perfect. Jonathan looks at it and smiles. He's actually flattered by the drawing.
It looks nothing like me. Well done. You have improved on your subject greatly.
Jonathan looks over the painting once more.
I do have one criticism.
And what is that?
I'm in a Roman toga, but your drawing style is far more Greek than Roman.
What do you mean?
It's almost too perfect.
Too much perfection has always been my imperfection.
The Greek artists made their subjects look flawless. Idealism, as you have done here. There are no flaws.
I drew you only as I saw you.
Jonathan looks down, unable to meet her eyes. Is he blushing from that comment? He clears his throat and continues.
Roman artists were known for verism. They included the less than perfect parts, the lines, the bumps, the imperfections.
I shall never allow a Roman to paint me then.
Here is where we disagree. I think the true beauty is in the flaws. It is what makes the subject human. Flaws can be a testament to one's struggles and growth. They come from our humanity, and that is where beauty really is. It is easy to admire something that is perfect and flawless, but real love is knowing the flaws of something and still seeing the beauty in it.
Well, then it's clear why not many find me beautiful. I am too flawless.
Prudence lets a bit too much of her true insecurity show for a moment. Jonathan looks at her, though, really seeing her. He begins to speak, but she cuts him off quickly, eager to change the subject.
You know so much about so many things. It really is quite frustrating. Your books, no doubt, are the culprit for this.
I cannot let you take a walk in Hyde Park tomorrow without my escorting you. You do know that much, do you not?
I do not need your protection.
You do not need my protection, but I fear Mrs. Darcy might. I insist on coming.
If you insist. All right, then. But I really do not see how much trouble you think I could get into on a simple walk in the park.
Exterior, Hyde Park day. Prudence, Catherine, and Jonathan slowly make their way around an empty park. The sun is blazing above them, and they move so slowly they seem to almost be swimming through the heat waves.
This is surely one of the hottest days we've had this time of year. May I attempt to appeal to your better judgment one last time and suggest we return back to your house? What I would not give for a glass of cold beer.
Oh, and I for a plate of cold meat. I'm famished. I do not believe God intended for humans to walk.
You may both return to the house then. Nobody's forcing you to be here.
Nobody's forcing me, but something is. My conscience will not allow me to leave you to this scheme of yours without supervision. Mrs. Darcy is a poor, unsuspecting gazelle being hunted by two lionesses. She will not stand a chance.
Thank you for your compliment. Lionesses are such majestic creatures.
I do not think we will catch anything in this heat. Not a gazelle. Not a Darcy.
You would have to be mad to walk in this heat, it is true. And what do we know of Elizabeth? She is mad. No doubt she will make an appearance here today. I am certain of it.
May I point out that we are also walking in this heat, which also makes us also mad?
Prudence looks around. The park is empty.
Very well. Perhaps you are right. I am feeling rather...
You do not look well. I know how determined you can be, Prudence. When you decide something, you will not rest until...
As she looks up, she sees Mr. Fitzwilliam Darcy walking gallantly over the hill. His shiny hair billows in the warm breeze. Damn. Prudence's mouth falls open as she is taken aback by how handsome he is. He's even hotter than the weather. It's unclear if he's a mirage or real. He looks over at her. Their eyes meet. Prudence closes her gawking mouth as he musters a smile. He's real, all right. Jonathan is extremely concerned as he looks at Prudence's reddening face.
Miss Priestly, are you all right? Your face is very red now.
Prudence watches as Mr. Darcy smiles at her. When out of the blue, Elizabeth runs up to him carrying wildflowers. The image of the two Darcys embracing begins to get hazy. They come in and out of focus as Prudence attempts to speak, but no words come out.
She does look quite awful. Prudence.
Elizabeth looks over at Prudence, her features turning very witch-like again. It's the return of the crone. She lets out a loud cackle as Prudence gasps. Blackness.
Prudence! Prudence! Can you hear me?
Interior, Priestly Manor drawing room, afternoon. Blackness. A little ray of light emerges as more light comes through. We see Jonathan's worried face looking down as Prudence's eyes fully open.
Miss Priestly? Prudence. She's coming to, Dr. Lovett. She's awake.
Jonathan is pushed aside by an elderly-looking man, Dr. Lovett.
Yes, she is. You can hold off on the smelling salts.
Prudence's eyes focus. She sees a relieved-looking Jonathan watching her and a baffled-looking Catherine smiling over zealously at her. Sir Winston stands next to them, and he lets out an audible sigh of relief. Dr. Lovett observes her like she's an alien species of some sort.
Dr. Lovett, am I home?
Now, there we have it. She's coming to, just a bit of deadly heat stroke as I suspected. Nothing to worry us too much.
Walking, Prudence? Really? Why would you do such a thing?
Prudence begins to register her surroundings.
Thank the heavens Mr. Darcy was there to carry you back home.
Prudence looks to her right and sees Mr. Darcy standing in the background. He looks at her intensely, but with concern. Prudence starts to feel hot again. Mr. Darcy's smoldering stare is like a sex furnace.
They carried you the whole way back, Prudence. It is such a shame you had to be unconscious for it all.
Prudence sits up, startled as she looks intensely back at Mr. Darcy. She tries to smooth her hair a bit even. Mr. Darcy takes a few steps forward. He stares at the bright red color flushing of her face.
You gave us all a scare, Miss Priestly. I'm very glad to see you've been revived and have not died.
Catherine and Prudence exchange knowing looks. This man is definitely smitten with Prudence.
I am feeling better. Mr. Darcy. Mr. Darcy.
Mr. Darcy gives her a smile that is just crippling. Even Catherine lets out an audible swoon, and he's not even looking at her.
Swoon.
It is very good to see you again.
It has been far too long.
Far too long indeed.
This conversation's going better than she imagined in her wildest dreams. Jonathan leaves the room, but nobody even notices. The loud voice of Elizabeth Bennet pops in to spoil the magic moment and ruin everyone's lives.
I am so glad you are awake. Miss Priestly, we have all been talking all day of nothing but how horrible you appeared.
Mr. Darcy looks over as Elizabeth Bennet enters the room. Prudence's smile fades as she sees the great wit enter the room. Elizabeth gives Prudence a saccharine smile.
Walking in this sort of heat is not for the weak.
Prudence's eyes narrow as she watches her enemy walk up to her.
I am sorry. We have not been properly introduced.
Please meet my wife, Mrs. Elizabeth Darcy.
It is a pleasure to meet you.
I do hope we shall be good friends, Miss Priestley. Mr. Darcy has told me so many lovely things about you.
Dr. Lovett, doesn't she look sick again? I think she might need some air.
Oh, yes, yes. Let her breathe some.
Dr. Lovett jumps into action, blocking her from her new bestie, as Sir Winston and Catherine crowd her again. Interior, Priestley hallway, morning. Prudence makes her way down the hallway. She looks literally much cooler than when we saw her last. Actually, she is downright lovely. The heat stroke seems to have agreed with her somehow. Prudence walks by the library door. It is wide open. She peers in and she sees Jonathan asleep on a wooden chair inside. She turns to a maid who is passing her by and nods towards the library.
Did Mr. Bannerman sleep there all evening?
Oh, yes, miss. He did, miss. He was so concerned about your health. Asked your father if he could stay near in case they needed someone to fetch the doctor again for you. It quite put your father at ease. It looks very uncomfortable, does it not?
The maid sighs and leaves as Prudence enters the library. Interior, library, day. As Prudence opens the door, it creaks. Jonathan jumps up and fixes his shirt. He rubs his eyes as he adjusts to the light.
Is it morning?
Prudence gives him a small smile. She seems radiant, and Jonathan notices.
You look
He clears his throat, holding back.
better.
I feel better. You slept here all night.
I was studying some books. I had to read for class, and so that was the reason I was here. My study books.
My maid told me you wanted to be near in case we needed the doctor again.
Oh, yes, and that too. I think it put your father at ease. I was not worried about you at all, of course. I knew you would be all right, but it would take more than a little thing like the sun to end the great Prudence Priestly. But your father, I could sense. Your father.
Was worried about me.
They lock eyes for a moment longer than is comfortable. Prudence looks away.
I do not always say thank you to you, Mr. Bannerman. Not nearly as much as I should. So, I shall not say it now. But because I do not say it, does not mean I do not feel gratitude.
Your father has been so kind to me. It is the least I could do.
I'll let you get back to your studies then.
Prudence begins to leave the room.
I do not know how much you remember, but it turns out she is quite nice.
Who?
Mrs. Elizabeth Darcy. I was able to get to speak with her a little bit during the ordeal yesterday.
I'm so glad you could fit polite conversation in during my health crisis.
She was genuinely concerned for you. I must assure you, Prudence, she seemed to have a genuine kindness in her. And she was actually quite witty.
How I wish I could have enjoyed her clever remarks too as I lay there dying.
My point is, maybe she's not as horrid as some people have made her seem, or as some people have hoped she would be. Perhaps you could cease this vendetta of yours. Perhaps you could just leave her alone.
The maid returns, interrupting.
Mrs. Elizabeth Darcy is here to see you, Miss Priestley.
Prudence turns back to Jonathan.
It seems she is the one who is not able to leave me alone, Mr. Bannerman. She is quite obsessed with me, understandably.
Prudence turns to the maid and follows her. Jonathan tries to sit up but grabs his neck. What a pain in the neck.
Ow.
Interior, Priestley drawing room, day. Elizabeth Darcy stands before the large windows looking out the window stoically. Prudence enters the room.
Oh, good to see you are doing so much better, Miss Priestley. I was so concerned for you.
Elizabeth lets out an audible sigh of relief as she makes her way towards Prudence. She looks Prudence up and down once more.
Mr. Darcy and I both could not simply get over how terrible you looked the other day. My husband said he'd never seen you look so awful in all his years, in fact. It was very distressing to see.
Prudence bites her lip, trying to keep a biting remark from coming out.
I am sorry that my appearance caused you both so much distress.
The hashtag savageness in Prudence's tone is not lost on Elizabeth. Prudence gestures for Elizabeth to take a seat with her.
Come, sit, please.
I am just relieved you're all right now.
I hope Mr. Darcy wasn't too worried. It sounds like he was.
Oh, no, not too worried.
Elizabeth gives her a comforting pat.
Wonderful.
The women sit in an uncomfortable silence.
I must confess, Miss Priestley, I did not come here merely selfishly. When my husband has spoken of you, it was clear to me that he holds you in some regard.
Some regard? Okay, now it's getting interesting. Prudence turns and leans in. It's tea time, girl. Spill it.
Mr. Darcy has surely not spoken of me that often. I mean, what exactly would he say about me?
In the past, he never spoke of you, not even once. But since his encounter with you the other day, he has spoken of hardly anything other than you.
Okay, that's something.
He has been telling me of all the good times you shared as children in Derbyshire. His opinion of you is very high.
Very high opinion. Prudence blushes. She's basically telling her that her husband loves her. This is super awkward.
And I think we both know how conservative he can be with his good opinions. Sometimes I wonder if I even have it.
Really? I mean, I'm sure you do. He must love you very much.
I fear my family has been a challenge. My mother has visited Pemberley more than I think he cared for, and then there were the other family members.
I am sure no familiar situation could take away his admiration of you.
He is not fond of my younger sister's husband.
Wickham really was a wild one, even as a child.
You know of my sister and her husband?
Maybe I might have heard of the situation. Not that I sit around discussing you. I promise you, I have many pressing and important things to do.
Forgive me, I am saying too much. We hardly know each other. I feel as if I do know you, though. The way my husband has spoken of you, and the way Mr. Bannerman spoke of you to me yesterday while you were ill. You truly must be a good woman to have the high opinion of such good men.
Perhaps it is more, I have their high sympathy rather than high opinion.
Yes, that could be it too.
Prudence thinks a minute. Wait, was she just dissed?
Yet, I think not. I long for a female confidant, Miss Priestley. So often these days. I used to have my sister Jane to confide in, but now she's been traveling with her husband.
London can be a very isolating place at times. There are so many people here. One may feel more alone than ever.
My husband calls you a dear old friend, Prudence. Would it be all right if I called you my dear new old friend?
Old? That was definitely a diss.
It would do me so much good to have a much older and more experienced friend such as you in my life. Someone I could really rely on for advice.
Merry dismiss indeed. This is getting to be a bit much.
I am not much older than you. We are quite close in age, I think.
Oh, you are mistaken. You are quite a bit older than me. Isn't your age at least...
I apologize for interrupting this very engaging conversation. I just wanted to give my regard to you, Mrs. Darcy. I was studying in the library and I heard the news that you were here too.
Mr. Bannon and I discovered we both share a great many things in common. We have the most delightful time yesterday, other than your obvious nearly dying, of course.
Of course, other than that small thing.
Prudence looks from Elizabeth to Jonathan. She is growing even more annoyed with this lady, if that were possible.
Oh, I am most tired. I fear I must go rest some more. The doctor insisted I try to stay in bed as much as possible.
Do you think you will be well enough to attend a picnic my husband and I are hosting this Friday? It will be my first introduction to so many of my husband's close acquaintances here in London. I could truly benefit from having my new old best friend Prudence there for guidance.
If only I could attend, but I do not believe I will be able to stomach that.
Jonathan shoots her a disapproving look. Elizabeth is taken aback.
I'm very nauseous from my episode. The doctor's orders, rest, 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 and no picnic food. He insisted on that, very strange.
I understand, but I'm very sad to miss you there. Mr. Bannerman, you'll still be able to attend.
I am very much looking forward to attending.
He gives Prudence a displeased look.
Do not take offense that Miss Priestley cannot attend. She is not one for the outdoors like you and I am, Mr. and Mrs. Darcy.
Nonsense. I adore the outdoors.
You took a walk outside yesterday and almost died from it.
I am corrected. I do believe I can attend your little picnic. I shall will myself to be all better for it. I am looking forward to it indeed, due to my passion for all things outdoors.
Oh, thank you, Miss Priestley. That makes me very happy.
Elizabeth merrily leaves, invigorated. Prudence is left looking like she wants to puke.
It seems Mrs. Darcy has made you a new best friend. Before you were able to make her your new best friend, she beat you at her own game.
Exterior, graveyard, day. Prudence prunes the grass around a beautiful tombstone. It reads, Gabriella Priestley, wife and mother, 1764 to 1808. Prudence takes great care in arranging a bouquet of flowers on the grave. Sir Winston approaches her.
Are you ready to return to the house, Prudence?
They both look down at the grave in front of them.
The flowers look lovely. She would be very pleased with you, Prudence.
He gives her a pat on the shoulder.
I often wonder if she would be pleased with what has become of me.
Why would you say such a thing? Who is prettier than my daughter, kinder than my daughter, more humble than my daughter?
Yes, this is all true. But her dream for me was to wed a man of my equal, so I could be as happy as you and she were, yet here I am, still unwed.
There is a problem in her plans for you. Nobody is your equal, I fear, my daughter.
Perhaps there is one man who could match up.
Then he will certainly be worth holding on to if you can find him. Do not let that one go.
Prudence's mind goes to a faraway place dreamily, no doubt to Mr. Darcyland. Exterior, Darcy picnic, St. Anne's Park, day. The posh picnic is in full swing. This is not your red checkered blanket sort of affair. Bougie Britain's finest are all in attendance. Servants have set up a sprawling spread of delectable fare. Guests mingle and drink merrily as a string quartet entertains those caring to listen with the latest classical hits. Prudence and Catherine enter the event and look around. Caroline Bingley excitedly waves to them and joins the duo.
Prudence! Catherine!
The ladies nod to each other warmly.
This is quite a desperate spectacle, is it not?
Caroline smirks. The trees aren't the only one throwing shade at this fetch fete.
Now, Caroline, do not be harsh. It is a worthy attempt at a party. If she had done only almost everything differently, then it would be quite a nice event indeed.
Prudence looks over in the corner. Her would-be bays, Beau Buford, Martin Marvins, and Sidney Snyders all look her way and hold up their wine glasses in a cheers to her.
The guest list is questionable, that is certain.
Those three still are determined that you need a husband to help you spend your fortune.
Hopefully Mr. Bannerman will not be too late to arrive here. I shall need to request his services to help protect me from the three vultures. He is useful for that, at least.
Mr. Bannerman has already arrived. He has been here for quite some time.
Are you sure?
Caroline nods towards a large oak tree. Prudence looks over where she sees Jonathan and Elizabeth in a deep conversation. Prudence is not pleased to see him conversing so freely with her horrible new best friend.
Poor Jonathan, he has had the misfortune of talking with her for some time.
Look at how he has to pretend to enjoy their conversation.
Prudence looks taken aback at seeing how engrossed Jonathan is in Elizabeth's conversation.
He does look bored. Would you agree? Very bored, actually.
Jonathan and Elizabeth share a hearty laugh at something she said.
Certainly. I mean, look at how he has to laugh so genuinely in order to mask how tedious he truly finds her.
I suppose I shall have to go save him this time. It is the conscionable thing to do, as he has rescued me from many dull conversations in the past.
Prudence begins to make her way towards Jonathan and Elizabeth, but she is intersected by the trio of suitors.
Why, if it's not the always lovely Miss Priestly? I was just thinking of you the other day. And how here you are. Now, what are the odds that we just might randomly run into each other like this? Could it be fate playing with the two of us, bringing us together?
Not fate that brought us together, but rather invitations, Mr. Martin.
Sydney takes the chance to jump in between them. This is like a weird Victorian version of The Bachelorette.
How I do admire your dress, Miss Priestly. Is that silk? I do believe it is no doubt the finest silk, most likely from China. I'm sure that, yes, I am. I'm always so interested in the materials young women choose to wear. They are so expensive. What you need is a sensible man to help you reallocate the money you are spending so frivolously on finery. What would you think of that now?
I would not like to think of that at all.
Sydney reaches out to try to touch the dress, but Beau steps in between his effort and Sydney ends up grabbing his cheek. Beau slaps his hand down. Sydney hits him again in a manner that could only make the Three Stooges impressed.
I was quite upset we did not get a chance to dance the other night. How I do love your gold. Gate. I meant gate, not gold. I do not care of money or fortune. I especially hate gold. But speaking of gold, though, do you still own a lot of it? I know your father was quite the precious metal investor back in the day.
Prudence forces a smile as she looks beyond them at Jonathan and Elizabeth, who are smiling and enjoying their conversation, oblivious to everyone else in the world. She realizes he will not rescue her this time. Prudence sighs as she looks at the three eager suitors. The trio's eyes are full of admiration at the jewels she is adorned with. They stare at her jewels with a look that is pure love.
That is certainly the largest emerald I have ever seen.
Indeed.
So beautiful. It reminds me of the eyes of a Persian cat. I will touch it now with your permission.
Please do not.
When she looks again towards Jonathan and Elizabeth, they are gone.
May you do me the honor of taking a walk with me later today, Miss Priestly?
After you take a walk with me, of course. I do believe I was going to ask you first, so I should get the first walk.
You are mistaken. I was going to ask her first.
But in all actuality, I did ask her first.
You all must excuse Miss Priestly. She is unfortunately under the doctor's strict orders to take no more walks. So I fear I must insist she decline all of your kind offers.
Prudence turns and sees Mr. Darcy smiling at her teasingly. The trio of suitors all bow to Mr. Darcy, showing their submission. There is no question that he is their superior, and they know it. Mr. Darcy turns to the three beta bows and nods.
Hello there. It is good to see you.
The beta bows rise from their bows. They smile at each other. Mr. Darcy spoke to them. Mr. Darcy's attention is already back to Prudence. He gives her a smile so heart-stopping that she might need a defibrillator.
Miss Priestley, would you care to take a stroll with me?
Mr. Darcy turns back to the beta bays.
A stroll is not as intensive as a walk.
The three beta bows all nod in agreement. Of course it is not. Everyone knows that. Mr. Darcy and Prudence excuse themselves and make their getaway. The beau wannabes all turn their attentions to Catherine and Caroline and smile widely.
Two lonely ladies. Three handsome gents. I do believe you are the most fortunate ladies here.
Exterior picnic day continuous. Mr. Darcy and Prudence make their way along the edge of the picnic.
It seems you are making a habit of saving me from ill-fated situations, Mr. Darcy.
Please, it is no trouble. I'm always at your service, Miss Priestley.
Mr. Darcy looks back to Prudence. They share a moment. Prudence nods towards a rose bush next to Mr. Darcy. She reaches over and smells it.
The flowers here in London simply do not compare to the ones we grew up with in Derbyshire. As lovely as they are, I do miss the gardens we grew up with. But of course, that was a very long time ago.
Was it? Well, when I look at you, it is as if no time has passed.
Prudence blushes. They look into each other's eyes. It is a moment that seems almost crystallized in time. That is, until a shrieking voice shatters it.
Miss Priestley!
Both Mr. Darcy and Prudence look over as a bubbly Elizabeth runs up to them.
You have arrived. How delighted I am that my dear new old friend is here.
Again, I'm not that old, Miss Darcy.
Proudly, Elizabeth nods towards the trio of beaux who mumble from afar about money to Catherine and Caroline.
Are you excited that I invited so many eligible young men for you? I did not forget my unwed friends. You are very welcome. Mr. Darcy, do you mind if I steal her from you?
Prudence sighs. She was trying to steal him from Elizabeth. Mr. Darcy nods affably as Elizabeth takes Prudence's arm and pulls her towards the table of food. Prudence starts to protest, but is cut off by enthusiastic Elizabeth's orders.
Come with me. Let us get you something to eat. There is something I wish to discuss with you most urgently.
She walks arm in arm with Prudence as if they have known each other for years. Exterior, Park, Southern Region. Day. The terrific trio of Martin, Beau, and Sydney watch the string quartet as Catherine and Caroline pout in silence at their misfortune. Sydney decides to break up the silence with some witty observations.
This music is good, but it's not the most beautiful sound I've heard. I can hear the alley cats fighting each night from my window. They shriek with the glorious sound of a banshee. There's something so beautiful in the wild music they make. It's feral yet also untamed at the same time. A feline symphony that not even the finest composer could match. Deliciously savage.
Catherine and Caroline look at each other. Dude is weird. Exterior, Park, afternoon. Prudence sighs even more annoyed. How does she escape this hell? Elizabeth smiles at her as she bites delicately into her picnic fare. The two women sit on a blanket together. Plates of decadent food sit in front of them.
I had the most wonderful conversation with Mr. Bannerman earlier today.
Prudence tries to glance back to Mr. Darcy. There is no doubt that he's the most handsome man there, or anywhere.
A man as well read and smart and clever as Mr. Bannerman should not be unwed. Do you not agree?
Prudence suddenly tunes in what Elizabeth is saying. Wait, what? What exactly is the twit talking about now?
What exactly are you talking about, dear friend?
Mr. Bannerman, I wanted to talk to you about how a man like himself should be married.
I must stop you here, Mrs. Darcy. I know where you are going with this conversation. Mr. Bannerman is a dear lifelong friend, but he is not my equal. I am a gentleman's daughter, and he is the son of a tenant farmer. We are not suited match.
What would people say if we were to wed?
Of course not. That was not what I was suggesting. I have it on good authority that Mr. Bannerman would never consider you a good match either for himself. He is so clever and smart and kind, and you are both so different.
Elizabeth smiles so sweetly that the sour words almost seem not to be an insult. Prudence shifts as they sit in an uncomfortable silence. Elizabeth forces a smile and uncomfortably tries again.
I want you to embark on a scheme with me, Miss Priestley, one with which I would be most grateful for your help.
I'm sure I do not know how I could be of assistance to someone as capable and clever as yourself.
My sister Mary is coming to town next week, and I have a feeling she and our Mr. Bannerman might be a very good match.
Our Mr. Bannerman.
They share such equal temperaments and interests. I think he and my sister would be very smart match indeed. Say you will help me.
I do not know how I could be of assistance in this plan.
I'm having a dinner next week in honor of Mary's arrival to London. I will invite you, of course, as my dear new old friend.
Not old, again, not old. I am still considered quite young in Japan. There are people who live to be 100.
I want to invite Mr. Bannerman to the dinner. It should be a very intimate one. As my closest friend, it would be expected to have you there, and you would need an escort. So it would not be odd to have Mr. Bannerman there as your escort. It would all feel very natural and not planned.
I do not know how much influence I have over Mr. Bannerman to escort me. He is so busy with his studies and work.
I think you have more influence than you know. He will not refuse any request you ask of him. I'm sure of it. I'm so eager for you to meet my sister Mary. Once you do, you will see a great match they shall make. I'm sure of it.
Mr. Darcy looks over at Prudence. Their eyes meet for a moment. Elizabeth, unawares, continues eating merrily.
And I know Mr. Darcy would be so happy to have you there.
Prudence looks back to Elizabeth, suddenly interested in her yammering.
Surely it would not matter to Mr. Darcy if I attend or not.
He has talked of nothing but you and Derbyshire and your days of childhood there since he saw you last. I think speaking with you brings up so many fond memories of the old days. This was all obviously long before my time. I'm so much younger than you both.
Fond? That's pretty much the same thing as saying her husband loves her and regrets ever marrying another. Prudence perks up.
I will attend your dinner, Mrs. Elizabeth Darcy.
And you will ask Mr. Bannerman to accompany you?
Mr. Bannerman too. I will make sure of it. We shall both be there.
Elizabeth gives Prudence a hug. Prudence tries not to recoil too much. Best friends forever. Exterior archery range, day. Prudence raises a bow and pulls back the arrow. She shoots. Bullseye. Let the Hunger Games begin.
Well done, Prudence.
When I aim for something, I do not miss.
She hands Catherine the bow and she fixes her hair.
How kind you are to help our Mrs. Darcy by gracing her with your presence at her awful dinner. You are truly too good, Prudence.
Yes, but I am doing it for Mr. Darcy, really. It seems he was quite eager to have me there.
Catherine's impressed.
I could not let my dear friend down, could I?
And yet you are letting your dear friend Mr. Bannerman down by throwing him to the hungry Bennet girls, surely to be devoured like a piece of meat.
Quite the contrary. Mrs. Darcy was going to embark on this outlandish plot of hers no matter if I had agreed to help or not. This way I can at least protect Mr. Bannerman by being there.
What if Mr. Bannerman finds a fondness for her sister, though? What if they bewitch him and he falls in love with his Mary?
I assure you that would not happen. Mr. Bannerman may come from a poor family, but he still has a very excellent taste. He can never love her sister. That I am certain of. Besides, he has no desire to marry. He has said so 1,000 times.
Exterior, Darcy Mansion, night. Jonathan and Prudence stand outside the door. Horrid singing and piano playing can be heard inside. It is not clear if it is a woman singing or an angry cat being bathed against its will. Prudence and Jonathan exchange worried looks as they imagine what is inside the house.
Is there a small animal being tortured inside?
As though you're in a place to judge, Miss Priestley. You who have never agreed to play for anyone, ever? What myself and half of London would give to hear you sing one day. You're all quite curious.
Of course you all are. But as I have told you, my singing is so skilled it would intimidate all the other ladies in town. I cannot do that to them. So I must refrain from sharing my beautiful gift with the world.
A loud off-pitch wail echoes from inside the house, and Prudence and Jonathan flinch.
Oh, it seems others could learn from my example.
Jonathan frowns disapprovingly at Prudence's jab. Prudence shrugs. Haters gonna hate. The door to the house opens widely as a painted servant stares at them. The music is even louder now, and somehow even more off-tune, as if that were possible. The servant opens the door for them to enter. Interior, Darcy, music room. A mousy, practical young woman with a very serious face bellows loudly as she plays a piano. This is the great Mary Bennet.
The wind is rain every day.
Elizabeth stands next to her, and she turns the pages for Mary as her sister sings away. Mr. Darcy watches from the side of the room, pained expression on his face. As the song ends, there is a long, much appreciated silence. Finally, Jonathan begins to clap as Prudence gives him a stern look. She reluctantly claps, and the rest of the room follows suit. Mary beams at the lackluster applause. She is a hit.
You have arrived. Oh, Mary, please stop singing and come and meet my friends.
Elizabeth makes her way across the room. Like a judgmental ferret, Mary primly raises and follows her. Mr. Darcy smiles as he sees Prudence, and Prudence returns his smile warmly. They share a moment that seems to last forever to Prudence, but is still too short. Elizabeth proudly presents her sister as if it were a great treat for everyone.
Miss Priestley, Mr. Bannerman, I present to you my sister, Miss Mary Bennet.
Mr. Darcy and Elizabeth stand next to Mary as she looks Prudence up and down and frowns. She does not seem impressed with Prudence at all.
Your dress is very interesting.
Prudence looks at Mary's plain frock in disbelief. Is this creature actually commenting on her fashion taste?
It's Italian silk.
I have never had a taste for expensive material like that. There are so many better things that money could be spent upon. I like to buy food for the poor with my spare income.
There is silence as Mary proudly smiles. It's uncomfortable. Mary then turns her attention to Mr. Bannerman. She looks at him up and down. She smiles. She's most happy with what she sees. He is much more pleasing to her than Prudence.
Mary, Mr. Bannerman has quite a love for books as you do.
Mary's eyes widen. That's hot.
Really, Mr. Bannerman, that is quite an admirable quality. I suspected as much. You have an intelligence in your eyes that is very noticeable in an avid reader.
Mary looks deeply into Prudence's eyes.
I do not think you care for reading so much, Miss Priestley.
I mainly read only legal books these days, Miss Bennet. I'm studying to become a barrister.
Mary raises an eyebrow. Super hot.
Now, that is a subject I do wish to learn more about. I find the law so fascinating. There is something so satisfying when people who sin are judged and forced to pay for it. I do not want to bore Miss Priestley with such intellectual talk, but I have so many questions for you, Mr. Bannerman.
What the heck? This ferret keeps biting with the little comments.
Mary, why don't you and Mr. Bannerman take a seat over there? I am sure he will be most happy to answer all your questions. Let me show you where to sit. Come with me.
Elizabeth leads Mary and Jonathan across the room. Before departing, Mary takes one final look back at Prudence and seems to almost sneer at her. Mr. Darcy looks at Prudence and smiles again. That smile is a much-needed safe haven, calling her in from Hurricane Bennet. He is by her side before she knows it.
Very good to have you here, Miss Priestley.
Prudence blushes like a child.
Thank you for the invitation.
Come, there's something I want to show you.
He motions for her to follow towards a bookcase. He takes out an album and opens it for her. She gasps. On it is the title page, The Flowers of Derbyshire. Inside, the book is filled with preserved flowers. Prudence begins to look at it, though, animated.
They are all from Derbyshire.
She goes back to looking at the book as Mr. Darcy watches her, admiring her, even possibly.
Ah, yes. There is the cross-leaved heather. And look, oh, the greater Caledine, the Tormentil.
Mr. Darcy smiles as he watches her flip through the pages, lighting up at each flower.
I remember as a child how much you loved the flowers in the garden at Pemberley. I recall you would spend hours picking large bouquets of them.
Much to the displeasure of your gardener, I think.
Prudence goes through the book carefully. She is in awe of each page.
I have not seen some of these in such a long time.
Sometimes, when you've not seen something in a long time, it's not till you see it again that you realize how much you missed it.
Prudence looks up and their eyes meet. Hello, hot boyfriend.
You were pleased then. I'm glad. When I discovered this book, I knew you must have it. Now you can have all the flowers of Derbyshire here with you in London, always.
This might be the most wonderful gift I have ever received.
Look, there. That is the one you used to love to pick the most, remember? I believe you used to make wishes upon it.
But alas, I see it is listed here as a weed rather than a flower. Perhaps that explains a lot then.
From across the room, Jonathan looks up and watches them for a moment. His heart seems to break a little bit as she sees how enthralled Prudence is in the conversation with Mr. Darcy. Elizabeth looks up and notices Jonathan watching Prudence and her husband. She then notices how her husband smiles at Prudence, and how this makes Jonathan frown.
Mr. Bannerman, Mr. Bannerman, Mr. Bannerman, do you not agree?
I am sorry. What was your question?
Shall I sing again before we dine?
That would be something to hear.
But you've already sung so many times tonight, Mary. Spare your voice.
No, I shall not disappoint Mr. Bannerman. Come, sister, you can turn the pages for me.
The sisters heads toward the piano. Jonathan looks one last time at Mr. Darcy and Prudence, who are in their own personal heaven, while he seems to find himself in hell. As if on cue, Mary begins to sing more. Yeah, this is definitely hell. Interior, carriage, coach, night. Jonathan and Prudence make their way home in the Priestly carriage. Prudence hugs her precious book of flowers as she stares out the window dreamily. Jonathan glares at the book with disdain. I guess we finally found a book he doesn't like.
When I was little, and I would plan my wedding day, and I dreamed of it being full of flowers. I wanted to cut all the flowers of Derbyshire and have them brought to my wedding.
It is fortunate for the flowers of Derbyshire then that you have made it clear that you will not marry.
I have made it clear that I do not need to marry. I am wealthy. I am accomplished. I am one of the pillars of London society. I have no need of a husband.
As you remind us all quite often.
If I ever did marry, it will be because I want to, not because I need to wed. Alas, it would take a man of my equal to even tempt me.
And alas, you have told us all many times a man like that does not exist.
Perhaps. And what of you? What did you think of the famous younger Miss Bennet? Could there be wedding bells in your future? She was most unique, plain yet unique. There are a few women who can embody both of those qualities.
Miss Bennet is a very intelligent young woman. She's well-read and well-versed. She does a lot of charitable work for the poor.
Oh, she did mention all of that quite a few times. I take it her siren song has won you over then?
Again, it is very easy to mock those brave enough to sing while you sit back, never taking the same risk yourself, Miss Priestly. She has a courage and lack of
awareness,
lack of pretension. That is refreshing. She does not care what people think. She likes to sing, so she sings. You dismiss people for what you consider are their flaws. Perhaps if you take a second look, you would see that these flaws are actually strengths, things to be admired.
No, I do not think so.
Prudence stares at Jonathan in disbelief. Jonathan will not meet her stern look.
What is this mood of yours? A man can only be this unhappy if he is in love. Could it be true, Mr. Bannerman?
Jonathan looks nervous as Prudence seems to hone in on his secret.
Could you be in love?
His face gives it away. He is a man in love.
Mr. Bannerman, you only just met Mrs. Bennet, yet here you are in love.
Prudence looks at Jonathan in disbelief. The carriage stops.
It seems we have arrived at my home. I thank you for the evening, but now I will take my escape.
Will you not answer my question?
I will not.
Jonathan steps out of the carriage and looks back at Prudence, who is holding her book. He takes a deep sigh and nods toward the book.
Promise me one thing, Prudence, that you will be careful there. Guard your heart.
Jonathan looks back at Prudence as he prepares to shut the coach door.
There's no greater pain than to waste your heart by giving it to someone who merely returns it to you shattered.
You need not be so fearful of heartbreak, Mr. Bannerman. The only way Miss Bennet will shatter your heart is if it is made of glass and she sings near it.
Prudence gives Jonathan a friendly smile, but irritated, he shuts the carriage door and rapidly retreats.
I did not mean to be cruel and mock your lover, Mr. Bannerman. I will be kinder to Miss Bennet if it truly pleases you. Come back, please, and let us make up. I can find nice things to say about your new love. She had very sensible shoes.
He might actually truly be mad this time. Exterior, Priestly house, day. Catherine and Prudence sit in the garden. Catherine excitedly looks through the book of flowers Mr. Darcy has given Prudence.
It is a very fine book. Oh, I do wish a man would give me flowers. You are so fortunate indeed.
To be accurate, it is a book of flowers. This is much better than just a bouquet of flowers, because this shall last a lifetime.
This is quite a gift, Prudence. Yes, I think it is. Why are you not more excited?
Oh, I am very excited.
What is the matter?
It is Mr. Bannerman.
No! Mr. Bannerman! How can you think of Mr. Bannerman when there is a Mr. Darcy in the world? A Mr. Darcy who has given you an incredible gift.
I know, but it has been several days since I have seen Mr. Bannerman. I could not help but think he was almost cross with me when we last spoke. It was all very strange.
Strange and Mr. Bannerman go hand in hand. So what if he is cross? He will get over it, and he will be back here again as he always is.
I am the one who should be angry at him. Here I should be, carefree and high spirits over my gift from Mr. Darcy, but he has tried to tarnish it all by quarreling with me.
Prudence, why do you even care? You quarrel with Mr. Bannerman all the time.
Exactly. I do not care.
I am sure he is still planning on being your escort to the Regent's Ball, if that is what concerns you. Did you select your dress yet? You must get a spectacular dress, one that Mr. Darcy will not be able to take his eyes off of.
As Catherine rattles on, Prudence forces a smile, but it's clear she is uneasy. Interior, Priestly Library, evening. Prudence begins to walk by the open door of the library. She looks inside and sees that it's empty. Her father walks by the room and stops to follow her gaze towards the empty room.
What are you looking for?
Oh, nobody.
Sir Winston sighs as they both look at the empty room.
I am sure he will be back soon.
Does not matter to me.
Sir Winston gives her a comforting pat on the arm. Exterior, London streets, day. Prudence steps out of a dress shop holding boxes.
Priestly, is that you? Could it be?
Prudence looks up and sees Elizabeth waving towards her. Prudence smiles, and the smile grows as she sees Mr. Darcy is walking with his wife. The smile suddenly fades, though, as she sees Mary Bennet and Jonathan with them. What the hell? Everyone is hanging out without her? The merry foursome approaches Elizabeth. There is an uncomfortableness between Jonathan and Prudence as she looks from him to Mary.
How good it is to see you today, Miss Priestley.
Mr. Darcy gives her one of his gorgeously restrained smiles, but she barely notices as she looks from Jonathan to Mary. Mary looks disapprovingly at Prudence's many packages.
More dresses. I am sure they are lovely. I wish I could not listen to my conscience and indulge as you do, Miss Priestley. But alas, I just cannot spend that sort of money on silly frocks when it could go to the poor. You are so fortunate that you do not care about being a good person, Miss Priestley.
The ferret has bitten again. Prudence looks over to Jonathan, who stares at her uneasily.
This is quite the happy foursome. Are you all out for a stroll then together? How did this happen exactly?
Mary looks at Jonathan with admiration.
Mr. Bannerman has been such a good guide to the city for me these past few days.
Few days? Have you spent so much time together?
I enlisted him, pleaded with him more like, to escort my sister and myself as we discover this lovely city.
He knows so much. What a smart young man he is, a true gentleman.
Yes, well, there we can agree. Are you not concerned about your studies, Mr. Bannerman? I noticed you have not been by to visit our library in some time. Your lessons are not suffering, I hope, from all this activity.
He is at the top of his class. They announced it the other day. Our Mr. Bannerman is simply brilliant.
Our Mr. Bannerman? Seriously, what the hell? Mary proudly pats Jonathan's arm, who smiles back at Mary sheepishly. Prudence looks like she is trying not to vomit.
Well, that is wonderful, Mr. Bannerman. I am very happy for you.
Do you care to join us, Miss Priestley? We're going to have tea.
Prudence glares at Jonathan, who continues to try to not notice her displeasure. He is looking at Mary instead, who beams at him like the sun.
Hey, all of you together.
Mary looks at Prudence and raises an eyebrow.
Are you ill, Miss Priestley? You look rather sickly, ghastly. You should go home, perhaps.
Yes, you are not looking well at all, actually.
Mr. Darcy gallantly steps in front of the new couple in order to get a better look at Prudence.
Oh, ill, most certainly.
I am not ill.
Perhaps that is just what she looks like then. I apologize. I thought she was sick.
Please allow me to see you home in my carriage. I will take you there right now.
I have a feeling that might just be the cure to make her feel better, Darcy. Good plan.
I have my carriage, but thank you for the kind offer. I will be all right.
I'm afraid I must insist, Miss Priestley.
I shall accompany the both of you too.
Sister, you cannot leave me and Mr. Bannerman without an escort. People are already talking about us enough.
Prudence does a double take. Seriously, what?
Who's talking about you?
You know how tongues of the wicked will wag. Idle gossip. It's all so salacious.
Mary laughs and pats Jonathan's arm yet again. She is a hoe for show.
It is settled then. Come with me, Miss Priestley. I will accompany you home in your carriage. Then I will walk back to town and meet you all once I have left the invalid.
Invalid? Seriously, what the hell? Mr. Darcy begins to pull Prudence away from the group, although she seems to want to stay now and investigate the strange new it couple. Mr. Darcy leads her dashingly through the busy streets, not allowing her to linger a minute longer, though. Interior, carriage, day. Prudence stares out the window, lost in thought. Mr. Darcy watches her with concern.
We shall be there soon. Shall I fetch the doctor for you?
No, you have done so much. It seems you have rescued me yet again.
Perhaps you are the one who has rescued me this time, Miss Priestley.
I rescued you.
It was an exhausting day.
But you all seemed like such a merry party.
Merry, indeed. She can be very outright in her opinions. That would have been a very long tea, as I do not think Miss Mary Bennet cares for me. No matter what our conversation is about, she always manages to mention that pride is the worst of all sins, second only to great wealth.
She is very subtle in her delivery, is she not? I have received a few of her opinions about myself too.
Now, what could she possibly say about you, Miss Priestley? You are truly perfect.
I would argue with you, but you have always been very right, Mr. Darcy.
She blushes. She looks like she is suddenly feeling much better. As the coach stops in front of the Priestley manor, Darcy gives Prudence an encouraging smile as he opens the door and helps her down.
I do hope you'll feel better in time for the Bingleys' dinner party. Miss Darcy would very much like to see you there. I would very much like to see you there too.
Mr. Darcy can barely meet her eye.
Then I will be there.
He finally looks at her again. Prudence and Mr. Darcy share a gaze that lasts just a bit too long. Mr. Darcy breaks the stare. It seems Prudence might have a bit of a fever after all, as she fans herself. Interior, Bingley home drawing room, day. A dinner party is clinging on desperately to the last few minutes of the evening. Guests mingle and converse as servants serve after dinner sherry. Prudence, Caroline, and Catherine all stare in confusion at the events taking place across a fairly full room of guests. Mr. Darcy is in a heated conversation with Elizabeth. They are talking very close to each other and intimately. Caroline looks at them and shakes her head.
Despite what you've told us, Prudence, I do not think he cares that you are here. He seems completely consumed by her.
I still do not quite understand it. They are a most mismatched pair.
They are completely wrong for each other.
Prudence looks less than pleased to see Darcy and Elizabeth in such an intense conversation. She takes a sip of her wine and her eyes fall upon an even more upsetting sight. Mary Mary Bennet, is trying to flirt in the corner with Jonathan. Prudence looks disgusted as Mary seems to try to entice Jonathan with a flirty smile. An angry frown forms on Prudence's face as she watches Jonathan and Mary. Catherine and Caroline are both still staring at Mr. Darcy and Elizabeth. What a waste of a handsome, rich man on a subpar woman.
But what can be done about it? I mean, the Bennet girl has won her prize. And that is that. She's beat us all.
Prudence's eyes narrow as she watches Jonathan and Mary speak. Mary touches his face briefly. Prudence looks livid.
He has not won yet.
She is married to him, Prudence.
I am far superior in every way to any Bennet, in my breeding, in my manners, in my education. Do you not agree?
There is no reasoning that makes sense, but what can we do? The Bennet sisters are apparently witches that cast spells on men with their song.
Is your piano tuned properly, Caroline?
I do not know.
That is all right. It is actually all the better if it is not.
Are you finally going to sing for us all, Prudence? This party will surely be the talk of everyone. How we have all longed to hear you sing.
It will not be myself singing, but yes, your party will be the talk of everyone nonetheless. I can promise you that, Caroline.
Interior, Bingley home drawing room, night. Prudence stands up and takes a deep breath as she watches Jonathan and Mary in deep conversation. Mary cackles. Prudence holds up a bell and rings it. All the heads in the room seem to stop and turn to look at her almost at once. Prudence seems almost nervous to carry on her plan, but she takes a deep breath and...
I have a request of our new friend, Miss Mary Bennet.
Jonathan looks at her suspiciously.
I have had quite the pleasure of hearing what a uniquely talented singer our new friend is, and I feel most guilty keeping such a pleasure from the rest of you in this room. Miss Bennet, will you not delight us all this evening with your musical talents?
Jonathan glares at Prudence, who tries her best to ignore his angry glare.
I would like that very much. Thank you, Miss Priestly. Perhaps another time would be better. It is getting very late for music.
You have been speaking a great deal this evening, Miss Bennet. I insist you must rest your vocal cords.
Mary sits up straight.
I am tired, but I can muster up the strength. Music does give me a second life.
Mr. Darcy looks mortified as Mary stands up heroically.
And God did not give me this voice so that I might keep it all to myself.
Jonathan and Elizabeth exchange worried looks. Mr. Darcy looks terrified by the prospect of what is going to happen. Prudence pretends not to notice the panic.
Wonderful. We are all in for quite a treat, I do believe.
Mary turns to her sister excitedly. The crowd begins to move toward the music room. Prudence looks a little uneasy as Jonathan gives her an angry look. Caroline excitedly stands next to Prudence.
Oh, Prudence, I have no idea what this plan is of yours, but I am most intrigued. This is all very dramatic.
She gives her a very excited smile and leads her towards the music room. Interior, Bingley home music room, night. Guests are seated around the room. Mary proudly makes her way to the piano with great pomp and circumstance. She smiles grandly, pleased to bless everyone in the room with her talent.
May I turn the pages for you?
Mr. Darcy looks at his wife with mortification.
What are you doing?
I cannot let her be up there alone. I will stand by her side through this.
Elizabeth gives her husband a defiant look and heads to the stage. Mr. Darcy looks mortified as his wife joins her sister. They are making quite the spectacle. Mary opens her mouth and lets out a cat-like screech. She begins to pound on the piano dramatically as she sings horribly. The crowd stares at Mary in disbelief. She honestly has no idea how terrible she is. There is a sole audience member, Sidney Snyder, of the Beta Bays group, who seems to actually like the music. His face flushes with admiration.
She sounds so refreshing.
You find the screeching of the cats outside your home soothing. Of course, you like whatever this is.
Nobody else in the room seems to share Sidney's high compliment. The rest of the guests shift and attempt to stifle laughter. An angry Jonathan stares toward Prudence, extremely upset. Prudence's smile fades as she realizes how displeased he is with her. She tries to ignore him. Elizabeth's face turns bright red as she looks at the mocking crowd. Mary sings all the louder and more passionately as the song continues. Half the room looks like they are watching a horror film. The other half of the room looks like they are watching a great comedy. Only Sidney seems to be watching a classic. He wipes a tear of true joy. Beautiful. He swoons.
Oh, this is all very embarrassing for them all. What an interesting family Mr. Darcy has married into.
This is very bad indeed. Oh, Prudence, you are so good.
Prudence's face breaks out into a large smile as she smugly watches the Bennet sister face public execution through humiliation. She glances over to Jonathan, who obviously feels horribly for the sisters. He looks at them with sympathy rather than disdain. Prudence's smile fades as she looks back to Mary. The giggling and laughter escaping the audience is hard not to hear at this point. Even Mary starts to become aware of it. Mary looks towards the audience, who is doing a poor job of hiding their amusement. She realizes she is the joke of the evening. Mary's fingers stop playing for a moment as she stares in panic at the pages before her. Her mind seems to have gone blank. Her voice has escaped her. Prudence looks around the room at all the laughing and mocking faces. She then looks to Mary's red face as the young girl fights back tears. Mary looks up at Elizabeth.
I do not remember the next line.
Prudence can't stand it. She clears her voice and belts out loudly and off key the next line.
Why is it so dark in despair?
The room stops and all the heads in it turn toward Prudence. Mary was bad, but this is somehow 1,000 times worse.
Why is it so dark in despair? Why is it so dark in despair?
The Beta Bays all drop their mouths in astonishment. Whispering can be heard among the shocked guests.
I'm starting to realize why she's never sung for us before.
Prudence confidently marches up to the piano and begins to sing as Mary starts to play. The good news is nobody is thinking about Mary anymore. They are far too shocked by Prudence's very awful voice.
My heart related, why is this so? What is this yearning, these troubling, these rapturous burdens?
No, she could learn from the alley cats, perhaps. They could teach her to stay on key.
Caroline and Catherine stare at their friend in disbelief.
What's she doing?
I have no idea. But she's all anyone will be talking about for days now.
Prudence clears her throat and keeps singing through the song. As she looks around the room, she sees the stunned faces of the crowd. Whispers and confused murmurs can be heard around the room. As Prudence sings or chokes up the last few lines of the song, her eyes meet with Jonathan. He is the only face that seems to understand why she went up there. Their eyes meet, and he gives her a gentle smile. She returns it. Caroline, confused, addresses the crowd.
I feel we have all be delighted enough tonight with this. Whatever this was tonight, I must insist our musical time end now.
Everyone stares at Prudence in disbelief. Nobody's even thinking about Mary's performance, except for Sidney, maybe? Interior, Priestly Music Room Day. Prudence hits the same note over and over again. She gloomily looks at the piano. She half-heartedly plays the tune that Mary played the last evening. She then slams the keys, annoyed.
I must say, this is an improvement on last night's performance, at least.
You have come to use the library.
I'm here to see you.
Me?
Prudence nods for him to sit. They sit in an uncomfortable silence for a moment.
What exactly was that last night?
Whatever do you mean?
I know you volunteered Miss Bennet so that you might embarrass her. That was quite obvious to me from the start.
That is not true. I simply thought she would enjoy the opportunity to...
But alas, you are not quite as heartless as you thought you could be.
Alas, if only I was.
What I do not understand is why do you have such a strong dislike for Miss Mary Bennet? I know why you do not like her sister, Elizabeth, but what has Mary done to offend you?
There's that horrid Brown.
Yes, I know. You have told me that many times. But does poor fashion sense warrant such an attempt at cruelty? You were very cruel last night, Prudence.
Yes. I should not have done that to Miss Bennet.
I was talking about your singing. It was very cruel to make us all listen to that.
So, my secret is out. I cannot sing. I'm not as perfect as everyone thought. How I have let them all down.
You do not let me down. I have never thought you perfect. I know you far too well. You are full of flaws. You can be selfish and you can be proud. You are too rich and taking a simple walk almost kills you.
Is being too rich really a flaw?
Oh, yes, it is. In your case, at least. But despite those surface flaws, Miss Priestley, even though you try to fight it, you have a heart that has the potential to be one of the kindest in the city. If you would only let it.
If only I would.
So tell me, why is it that you dislike Miss Mary Bennet so much?
Jonathan looks at her, hoping for a specific answer. It almost feels Prudence meets his eyes.
I envy her.
Their eyes lock. The moment is intense.
You envy her?
Their eyes are completely locked. Prudence can't take it anymore, and she looks away.
She has such sensible brown shoes. Who would not envy her? You are going to escort me to the Regent's Ball again this year, if I promise not to sing at it.
I have promised Miss Bennet to accompany her.
Oh, of course.
We could pick you up in the carriage on the way. Perhaps we could all go together?
Oh, no. I am out of your way. That is all right. Please, just do not trouble yourself.
Jonathan looks down. This suddenly feels like an awkward breakup.
You will find someone who is your equal one day, Miss Priestley. I have faith that you will get that wedding full of flowers yet. It is what I hope for you more than anything.
Jonathan and Prudence's eyes lock for a lingering moment once more. There's so much he seems to want to say.
I must go.
He gives one last long look. It seems like he does not want to go.
Goodbye, Miss Priestley.
They both look as if there's so much more they both want to say, but it remains unsaid. Jonathan exits, leaving Prudence looking very small in the big room. He is gone. Interior, London, tea room, day. Prudence, Caroline, and Catherine sit around the tea table for a tea spilling session. Caroline excitedly leans in.
I'm not sure if I should wear one ribbon or two to the ball. It's too many.
It is the Regent's Ball. Where to?
I shall then.
Prudence, you have been so quiet all day. What is wrong?
Is this because of all the awful things people are saying about your singing?
I thought you said nobody was talking about my singing anymore.
Oh, yes, but they're not talking about it any less either.
I have some news that is sure to cheer you. It will make you laugh quite heartily, no doubt.
I do love news.
My cousin's maid took it on good authority from the Darcy's maid that the Bennet girl is actually engaged. Can you believe it? She overheard it being discussed, although they are keeping it a secret for the time being for some reason.
Engaged? Mary Bennet.
She did not say to whom she was engaged, but I think we all know who it must be.
Do you think she shall wear a lovely, sensible brown wedding dress?
Regina George would be impressed with that slam.
It cannot be Mr. Bannerman she's engaged to. Can it?
Who else could it be? He is the only gentleman who seems able to tolerate her.
He has always been one for charity cases, has he not? They make so much sense together.
I am so glad I never found him attractive. He has very poor taste.
I must go.
She stands abruptly.
But you have not even finished your tea. What is your hurry? Do you have a singing lesson?
But shall I call a carriage for you?
I think I shall walk today.
Walk? On your feet?
She is acting very strange.
Very strange indeed.
Exterior, Hyde Park, afternoon. Prudence walks through the park.
Marry her? How could he marry her? They are very well suited for each other.
Are you all right, Miss Priestley?
Mr. Darcy looks like he's straight off a romance novel. As his skin glistens in the sun, he stares a smoldering stare at her.
Oh, Mr. Darcy.
You were saying something.
Oh no, I was not speaking to myself.
One of your walks. Should I call the doctor, have him on standby?
I do not think that will be necessary.
May I walk with you? Just to be sure, of course.
Prudence blushes. He really is so dashing.
Of course.
Exterior, Hyde Park, continuous. Prudence and Mr. Darcy walk together. The park has grown mostly empty. They are in deep conversation.
I must thank you for saving my sister-in-law and wife the other night from that scene.
It was because of me they were put in that situation.
You did not mean any harm to her. I know you well, too well to think that you could ever be capable of such cruelty.
Prudence looks at Mr. Darcy. He does not know her very well at all.
May I be so imprudent as to ask you a rather unusual question?
Oh, we are old friends, please. Ask me anything.
You and Mrs. Darcy come from such different backgrounds. How is it exactly? How did you come to love her?
I often wonder how she came to love me.
It must be very difficult, you being so superior to her in so many ways.
There was a time I thought myself superior, I do confess. But as I grew to fall in love with her, her strengths became all the more apparent to me, as did my own faults become more apparent to me. I may have the better fortune and the better pedigree, but it is because of her I am now a better man.
Prudence looks at Mr. Darcy. It is clear that this is a man in love with his wife.
I think you made a very good choice in your selection of a wife, Mr. Darcy. I must tell you, I could not think of a better equal match for you. I will give you my blessing.
Thank you for your blessing. Shall we continue our walk?
If you do not mind, I am realizing that I might need to learn to walk alone in life.
Prudence heads off as the sun begins to set alone. Interior, Priestly drawing room, evening. Dressed in a ball gown, Prudence stares up at the painting of her mother. Sir Winston enters the room and gasps.
You look beautiful.
I know. Thank you, Father.
Will Mr. Bannerman be here soon?
He will not, Father.
What is wrong, my daughter? More wasp?
It turns out that perhaps I was the wasp all along. It would seem that I was the one doing all the stinging. But I am going to try to do better, Father. No more singing, no more stinging.
They look up at the portrait of her mother.
When she asked if it was okay for her to go, I wanted so badly to tell her not to leave, but I wanted her to fight the illness more, even if she was in pain. But all I could say to her was, it's okay to leave.
Prudence takes Sir Winston's arm.
Sometimes it takes more love to set someone free than to cling on to them.
They look up at the portrait and smile.
She would be so pleased with you, Prudence.
Perhaps not. But I am going to become someone she could be proud of. I'm going to try to do better, Father.
Exterior, Regent Hall, night. A drawing turns into the magnificent Regent Hall. Posh couples make their way up the stairs of the historic building. The sound of music plays from within the massive building. This makes the ball at Carlton House seem more the size of a golf ball. Everything is bigger and brighter. Interior, ballroom, night. The party is in full swing. Dancing is taking place in the middle of the massive floor as bystanders watch, entertained. Beautifully dressed Prudence enters the ball. She is wearing less makeup and jewels than usual, but her face is far from plain. Catherine joins her by her side. They look around the room to take in the stats. Across the room, Elizabeth Darcy talks with Mr. Darcy. Sydney, Beau, and Martin regale Mary with their usual horrible banter. Jonathan stands near them, listening to their conversation with a good-humored smile. Prudence's eyes fall on Jonathan, who seems to be genuinely having a good time. Catherine sighs, looking bored at the crowd before her.
It is the same people.
Prudence nods as she looks at Jonathan's face.
Always the same faces.
Jonathan looks up at her and their eyes meet. He begins to walk towards Prudence.
Oh, how tedious it is to see all the same faces always.
Jonathan reaches Prudence and bows just as Beau walks up to Catherine and extends his hand to her, asking her to dance. Catherine sighs annoyed as Beau escorts her to the dance floor.
Always the same.
It is just Prudence and Jonathan now, alone in a room overflowing with people.
I came tonight to specifically tell you something, Mr. Bannerman.
Oh no, this cannot be good. What have I done now?
You have done nothing. It is I who has been in the wrong. But I want to let you know, I will do better. I want you to be happy, Mr. Bannerman. It is all I want for you. Even if your happiness may make me unhappy, then I am still all the more happy in my unhappiness due to your happiness.
Jonathan looks back towards the dance floor where couples are lining up, preparing for the next dance to begin.
What would make me truly happy right now is if you would dance with me, Miss Priestley.
Gallantly, he holds out his arm for her. She takes it and he leads her to the ballroom floor. Interior, ballroom, dance floor, evening. Prudence and Jonathan join the couples in a dance. As Jonathan turns Prudence around, they gaze into each other's eyes. They laugh as the dance picks up speed and they spin even faster and faster. There is a strong chemistry. They cannot seem to take their eyes away from each other. As the music ends, Jonathan looks even more deeply into Prudence's eyes.
Could we take a turn outside on the balcony for a moment? There is something I must tell you.
There is no need. I already know what you're going to say.
You know?
I know everything, Mr. Bannerman. That is the one thing you should know by this point. And I want to let you know that it is all right. You're not my Mr. Bannerman. You do not belong to me. So I set you free.
Indeed. I am not your Mr. Bannerman, I see. I will excuse myself.
Prudence sadly watches him leave from the balcony as Elizabeth Bennet approaches her.
You look very lovely this evening, Prudence.
As do you, Miss Darcy.
Prudence and Elizabeth both look at Mr. Darcy, who stares at the crowd with a look of almost disdain. He looks over at Elizabeth and smiles. Prudence catches their exchange.
I believe he married far above his station in life, and anyone who does not see that is mad.
Prudence, I must ask for your forgiveness.
Me? What have you done to me?
I was jealous of you, terribly jealous. There was a part of me that always worried you were a better woman, the sort of woman my husband should have married.
I am not the better woman, Miss Darcy. I simply have more money.
I thought you were in love with my husband, and he would not be wrong to leave me for someone like yourself.
Now that is silly.
Yes, I see that now. As I watched you and Mr. Bannerman dance together, it could not be more clear that your heart belongs to him. I suspect it did, but that dance, it made me certain of it.
I understand what you are implying, but Mr. Bannerman and I are merely good friends. Your sister is very fortunate. He's going to make an excellent husband for her. The Bennet sisters need not worry. I will not come for either of your husbands.
I think you are mistaken, Miss Priestley. My sister is engaged, but not to Mr. Bannerman.
Elizabeth nods over towards Mary, where she and Sydney are exchanging sexy looks.
Mary has fallen in love with Sydney Snyder. After the night of our impromptu concert at the Bingley party, Mr. Snyder began to call on my sister.
Interior, Darcy living room, flashback. Sydney bows to Mary as she holds the cat. She shines in her brown frock and sensible brown shoes. He stares at her in disbelief.
Are you all right?
I have never seen such beauty.
Their eyes lock. Interior, Regent Ball, present day.
But Mr. Bannerman escorted her tonight.
Mr. Bannerman agreed to escort her this evening as a personal favor to me. My sister and Mr. Snyder must keep their engagement a secret for some time. The Snyder family is sure not to approve, given my sister's very modest income. They wanted him to marry wealth, as we all know.
But Mary and Mr. Bannerman were spending so much time together.
And the more time they spent together, the more clear it became to us all that he was in love, but not with Mary. His heart is yours, Prudence. He talked about you more than I think he realized, and more fondly than I think he realized too.
Mr. Bannerman is not marrying your sister.
Prudence, can you not see what is so clear to the rest of us?
Prudence looks towards the balcony where Jonathan stands looking at the night.
I must go.
Of course, my dear young friend.
Prudence walks rapidly across the room, unescorted at that. Scandalous. She reaches the balcony door and takes a deep breath, opening it. Exterior, balcony, night. The balcony is mostly empty. The crowd has returned to the dance floor as a new dance has already started. The romantic music muffles out onto the balcony. Jonathan looks at the garden below him as Prudence walks up behind him.
You are full of flaws, Mr. Jonathan Bannerman.
Jonathan turns, surprised to see her.
You always have to tell the truth, which really can become annoying.
Is telling the truth a flaw?
Oh, yes, it really is. In the manner you do it, at least. I hate it. You read far too many books, and you can be prideful about how smart and talented you are.
How is reading too many books a flaw?
I am grateful for that flaw. It brought you to our home so many times.
Our law library is a few minutes away from my lodging, yet I would walk an hour to use yours instead. Did you ever not ask why, Miss Priestley? I would walk 1,000 miles just at the hope of getting to see you.
It would seem you and I are equally flawed. But perhaps it is our flaws that somehow make us perfect for each other.
Jonathan moves in and kisses Prudence passionately. Behind him, the ballroom is lit up with dancing. We see only their silhouettes in the foreground of the bustling party behind them as the ballroom music swells romantically. Exterior, Priestly Garden, day. Prudence, in a beautiful wedding gown, smiles and looks into the eye of her groom, Jonathan. He stares at her adoringly as their friends and family throw white petals and rice at them. Elizabeth Darcy and Mr. Darcy clap, full of joyful laughter. Mary and Sidney stand by each other properly. He looks down at her plain dress and pats it lovingly. She smiles back at him. Catherine and Caroline clap and cheer merrily. Martin and Beau slide up to the single ladies and wink at them before they start clapping too. Catherine and Caroline look annoyed. Sir Winston smiles and claps for his daughter. He beams with happiness for the couple. Prudence, surrounded by the perfect flood of beautiful flowers, looks into the eye of her groom. It is everything she dreamed come true, but better. Jonathan leans in and kisses her as flurries of white petals like snow cover the very happy couple. It is a perfect wedding.
As my wedding gift to the happy couple, I shall now sing a song I have prepared.
Well, there is no such thing as a perfect ending now, is there?